Okay, hopefully this will actually work this time. Um, I want to discuss in brief detail, understand that this is a considerable simplification of a very large body of knowledge. How to go about defending a software-defined data center from external intrusion. Um, Also, how to define, now it will be somewhat more difficult to defend said software-defined data center from an illegible malicious internal intrusion or compromise. Um, to a certain extent, defending a virtualized data center and defending an actual physical data center are more or less the same idea. There are certain things you have to keep in mind. Um, Also, certain things that are a little bit more risky in terms of your virtualized data center. But really and truly, some of the basics are almost painfully simple. Um, Implement proper firewalls, implement proper network intrusion detection, implement proper data loss prevention on the perimeter, or even the internal perimeter, say DMZs. Think about who needs to use said software-defined data center. If it is a private cloud, make sure that private cloud is only accessible from the campus or across the WAN links that need access to it. Um, Put layers of security between the outside of your network and the parts of your network you're trying to defend. Um, Implement reasonable but not unreasonably complex password complexity requirements. Because remember, one of the rules of, of cybersecurity is physical access is root access. Um, and so in this case, that means that login access to the hypervisor is physical access essentially to everything on it. Make sure you control who has those passwords. Make sure they're too difficult to guess, but not too difficult to remember. That'll protect you from things like rainbow table attacks. Make sure that those credentials don't leak. Then, once you start working on actually implementing all the security, bear in mind the way an attack happens. Now, there are multiple frameworks for this. Um, there's the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. There's the ATT and CK framework. Um, they all have the same general idea, which is that there's an attack pattern that has to happen as someone works their way from the outside of the network into the network, across the network to their ultimate target. Um, so reconnaissance, scanning, exploitation, and pivoting. Understanding that pivoting means essentially starting um, at, as you're pivoting, you're basically getting back to step 2, if not all the way back to step 1, worming your way deeper and deeper and deeper into your target system. It will kind of look like this. Reconning from the outside of the network with passive reconnaissance, open source intelligence. Truly passive reconnaissance will be carried out at some distance across the web, possibly anonymized, using open source information, newspaper articles, trade press, um, social media, etc., etc. Then once you get that passive reconnaissance in place, the target may move to an active reconnaissance, which is to say reconnaissance on the premises of the target location, particularly if it's going to be a physical attack or have a physical component. Then they'll begin scanning the exterior of the network. Now, one thing that may happen here is the intruder may look at what's going on in the reconnaissance phase, and before the reconnaissance phase is even complete, the intruder may determine that the primary target is too well protected, and they may shift to a secondary target, say a supply chain, a vendor, attacking your primary target through a secondary target like a vendor is what we call a supply chain attack, and it does happen. The user would move on to scanning, then exploitation, scanning for vulnerabilities, exploiting vulnerabilities, and then inside the system, pivoting and lateral movement to move deeper inside the system until the attacker actually reaches some place on the network where he or she or they can pull off what we would think of as actions on the objective. So in the reconnaissance phase, of course, the user is searching, primarily using open source intelligence, as I said, trade press, newspaper articles, LexisNexis, any number of easily and readily available sources of information. Then moving into the scanning phase, they may use something like Nmap, Zenmap, UDP stress testers, tools, the hacking tools that are available on the dark web, looking for what on the system is open and available, if they can determine operating systems, version numbers of the services running through open ports, if the service is virtual or physical. And then once they have that, they can begin the exploitation phase, which is to target a specific potential vulnerability and begin to try to push something through it, using something like Metasploit or Armitage, or again the kind of dark web, black market cracking tools that are kind of traded on the deep web. Then finally, once they get in, they'll pivot. And what we mean really by pivoting itself is a multi-stage operation. Step 1 is to get in. Step 2 is to escalate privilege. Step 3 is to consolidate control. This is actually something that advanced persistent threats will sometimes do. They'll get into a target. For example, you deploy a piece of APT software onto a computer for the sake of turning it into a bot or a zombie. One thing it may do is look for indicators of compromise by other systems, and then close those out, make sure that it alone is in control of the system. And then it can actually begin going all the way back to the recon scan phase, looking for new targets of opportunity farther inside the system in a chain of lateral movement. Now, we can do some things to prevent these things. Some malware will actually detect that it is running virtually. It will attempt a VM escape, taking advantage of flaws in the hypervisor or device drivers, maybe attacks like device driver shimming, to try to insert itself into the OS so it can reach past, because of course the guest system and the host system are interacting with each other in terms of their hardware. So if the attacking piece of software can pull off, say, a data execution exploit, so to put executable code in what looks like data space, or feed a command through the hypervisor into the host system. It can also pull off, say, directory traversal attacks. It may attempt to insert a rootkit or a remote access Trojan to maintain that access for the long term. Some of these attacks, don't expect them to be in and out in 30 seconds or 30 minutes. They may compromise the system and then sit there for a long, long time, trying to figure out, okay, what can I do with this? Or what can I learn? Or maybe the fact that they're sitting there and learning is the whole point. The best defense is to keep your system up to date. Patch everything, implement configuration management, scan your hosts and your VMs with antivirus. Build network defenses into the inside of your SDDC. And next, we'll talk about the chapter summary. We'll summarize the chapter and we'll be done with chapter 4.